Welcome to the S.O.A.P Bible Study video series from Oak Tree Community Church in South Bend, Indiana. We are in week 2 of a short series through some Old Testament prophetic books.
Right.
And last week we started the book of Amos, got about halfway through. Yep. And this week we're going to finish Amos and do Obadiah because it's short.
Yep. And it fits in there.
And it fits, yeah.
So from a reading standpoint, we have 4 days of Amos, one chapter each day, and then Obadiah, one chapter. Or you could read the whole book.
If you want to.
Yeah. That's a good way to put it. So last week we started a new book about Amos, and we know that Amos was a prophet, but Amos actually considered himself a herdsman and a grower of, sycamore fig trees.
Yeah, he wasn't a professional prophet. He was a tradesman.
Yeah.
Right? You know,
yeah,
and
so
God
then,
says, I want you to do this. Like, okay.
Yeah, and I think he even says, God said I'm doing this.
Yeah.
And,
well,
or
the
God
thing
said
is,
to say this.
We don't even know. I mean, is this the only prophecy that he gave? We don't really know anything else about him other than just this. You know, is this he dumped all this stuff and then he's like, and back to my trees, you know?
Right. Yep. So we do know that, from a time period, we said that he and the other prophets taught during the divided kingdom time. So the time when Israel was actually split into a northern kingdom and southern kingdom.
Yeah.
He lists 2 kings that were in charge during that time, and we can tell by the overlap, about when he talked. But it was a period of prosperity, especially for the northern kingdom.
Right.
And then from his standpoint, his message was a doom and gloom message. Yeah. I've been saying, because 90% of the people are not going to be here much longer.
Right.
But it was basically, Israel, you need to repent. Israel, you need to repent. Guys, it's getting late. It's getting late. And then we ended last week with, I think, death is imminent.
Yeah. Here's a funeral song.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we said, we didn't end on a happy note. So we pick up on that not happy note and one on a little bit of a happier note.
Yeah, just keep going. Chapter 6, he says, if you don't, almost says, if you don't think I am capable of doing this, he says in verse 2, hey, go over to Kalnet. Take a look at that. Go look at Hamath Ravah. Go down to Gath of the Philistines. Are they superior to your 2 puny, I'm putting the word puny in there, puny kingdoms? I mean, these were your enemies. These were people who had defeated you. I wiped them out. They don't even exist anymore. And you think you're going to stand here and disobey me and get away with it?
Right. He starts in on the aristocratic society there. They're living the high life. We kind of touched on this last week, and it continues this week. You have this set of people who are wealthy, and again, just because they're wealthy isn't a bad thing. It's what do you do with it?
Right.
Just like anything else. So what they were doing with it was becoming more wealthy and living off that wealth and not helping the poor.
And God had promised to bless Israel, prosperity, wealth, no sicknesses, if they would actually obey him. So the problem is that, much like today, people do their own thing. They do completely the opposite of what God says, and they get some money and say, see, God is blessing me. It's like, come on.
Right. And in fact, God says they're the first to go into exile. Yep. So not a good thing. So why would God say you're the first to go?
Well, in this case, in chapter 6, verse 1, it's not just the elites, but it's the leaders. So the leaders are living this way and leading the whole nation astray. And so leaders are held to a higher standard.
Right. But from the first to go, that would also mean when a foreign army is coming in, they're going to be targeting the leaders.
Right. Yeah. Well, and we see that when Nebuchadnezzar came from Babylon for the first of the 3 exiles.
Right.
In Daniel chapter 1, it was the nobles, it was the best and brightest that he took away first.
Right, but not necessarily the moms and dads, but the kids.
Yeah.
Right, and taking them back.
Yep. So he basically took away the next generation of leadership.
Right.
And the parents are, eventually they either died or they were taken into captivity. But yeah, they literally were some of the first to go into exile.
Chapter 7, Amos seems to have a vision, so he's seeing things and pictures, and the pattern seems to be that he sees a great tragedy, and then he cries out on the behalf of Israel.
Yep.
And God, backs off and then shows them another one. So he and excuse me for laughing. Well, he saw God making locusts.
Yeah.
And I get the Far Side picture in my mind where God is making snakes and he's, this is easy type of thing. So God's making a bunch of locusts, but of course the locusts are going to come out, they're going to eat all the food, and they're going to cause famine, and there's going to be some problems. So apologies for the laughing.
What's interesting is that Joel, which is the book just before Amos, has a huge locust issue too. And Joel, we don't really know anything about or when it's dated. And so it could be just before, most people think it's just before or just after Amos, when these things did actually happen. So either Amos was seeing this as a second time, or he was seeing this and then the people didn't repent and come back. And so God actually did it. And that's what Joel talked about. So somewhere in the same, these were some of the, Hosea, Joel, Amos. You can go through the minor prophets almost chronologically, actually, from earliest to late. Not exactly, but pretty close. But Hosea, Joel, Amos are probably some of the first ones, some of the earliest of these prophets,
So Amos also saw a shower of fire, and then he also saw a tin wall. Mm-hmm. And I think we need to talk about the tin wall a little bit, because it's kind of odd seeing a tin wall, and of course it was what it represented, not actually being a tin wall.
Yeah.
So what would a tin wall represent?
Well, so that's what the net translates this as. Some other translations have lead instead of tin.
Well, that helps.
That helps. I think, no problem. Now we know what it is. The concept of like a lead plumb line, where you got a string with the weight on it, and that's how you know if something's straight. And so in some other translations, they see this and God is measuring, sort of like to see if they are straight, right? Some translators, or some commentators rather, look at this tin wall and say they think it refers to Assyria's army.
Because this tin wall, probably an important point, was like in the middle of Jerusalem.
Yeah.
Right. So that first thing in the middle would make a lot of sense.
Yeah. Yeah. If it represents Assyria's army, then that would make sense in the northern kingdom, because it was Assyria that took the northern tribes into exile in 722. So either way, I'm about to place tin among my people Israel. It still references judgment of some kind. I will no longer overlook their sin. Right? Yeah. So I will attack Jeroboam's dynasty with the sword. So some kind of military
action
something.
that was happening.
Yeah, yep.
And then Amos kind of takes a step back, and it's almost a personal issue that he's having.
Yeah.
But he's talking about an issue that he had with a false priest. And the false priest had warned the current king about Amos and the prophecies that he was making. Hey, this prophet says you're going to die.
Yeah, right.
You might want to take care of the prophet.
Instead of actually listening to the prophet, get rid of the prophet. This is literally the definition of shoot the messenger.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And that's where Amos said that, hey, look, you can blame me all you want, but it's God who commanded me to say. It's God that gave me the
herdsman, right?
Yeah, I had to.
Yeah.
All right, chapter 8, there's a fourth vision that Amos gets, and he sees a lovely basket of summer fruit.
Yep.
And I'm thinking the tide is turning here. We're getting out of the doom and gloom, but not quite yet.
Nope.
Sounds great, but it's not. If you kind of equate it to summer fruit comes to an end, and then there's a harvest.
Yep.
And what they're saying is Israel's come to the end of her time.
Yeah. Yeah, so harvest in harvest when it comes to promises is usually a good thing. Bountiful harvest or whatever. Harvest in judgment passages is a bad thing, because now you're thinking of the sickle, the scythe where it's cutting them down.
Right.
And that's what it is.
That's what,
You've got, all you've got left is your summer fruit. You're
you're at the end. You're at the end of your time.
Yeah.
So then there's some judgments, and it seems like there one was for the present day of Amos's time, one was for a little bit later, and then one may even be future for today, right?
Well, future probably tribulation, like day of the Lord.
But I mean future from us.
Even from us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Assyria brought the death and destruction. There was a famine that seemed to be later. And then earthquake and darkening of the sun, the day of the Lord, which we would equate that to a future event. In the tribulation.
Yep. There's as we go through the prophets, the phrase "that day" or "in that day" a lot of times refers to the day of the Lord, future. It's interesting. In verse 11, he talks about a famine, and there's definitely some food and water famine type stuff. But he says in this particular famine, it won't be a famine of food and water, but it'll be a famine of divine revelation, where there's not going to be any prophecy. And I think that was probably fulfilled in those 400 years between Malachi and what we call the New Testament, the Gospels.
Right.
God is like, you're on your own. I'm still there. He still obviously was with Israel,
right,
but no new prophets for about 400 years. And a lot of people think that this famine for the word of the Lord is that drought in what we call in between the testaments.
Well, it makes sense as distinct periods.
Yeah.
In there.
Yep.
Then we get to chapter 9.
Woo.
Yay! So chapter 9 is about the reconciliation. Yes, the nation of Israel has gone down a bad path for hundreds of years. Yes, Assyria is going to wipe them out. They can't run. They can't hide. But God says that he will rebuild David's dynasty.
Yep.
And one day Israel will rule their land, the land of milk and honey, and they will never again be uprooted.
Yep.
So ending definitely on a big high note.
Yeah, chapter 9, verse 13. Be sure of this, the time is coming when the plowman will catch up to the reaper. They will have, so here's the positive side of reaping, the harvest, right? There will be so much harvest, and we see this in the coming kingdom, right? In Messiah's kingdom, the millennium. There will be so much harvest that they will still be harvesting when it's time to plant.
Nice.
So they're like, get out of the way, we have to plow so we can plant. I'm still harvesting last year's crop. How cool is that?
Maybe we have enough.
But that's the type of thing that they're looking forward to, and they think that God is blessing them early on. He says, no, judgment's coming first, and then blessing is coming. But I will bring back my people, Israel.
Yeah,
that's a promise. Yeah.
Nice. All right, so that's it for Amos.
That's Amos, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
So quick.
Turn one page over to Obadiah.
Yeah. So Obadiah is the fifth reading of this week. So the same basic questions: who is Obadiah? When did he live? All that kind of fun stuff. We don't have a lot of identifying factors.
Not really
for this guy.
No, in fact, there are several men throughout the Old Testament named Obadiah.
Right. And more than likely, it wasn't this guy.
Probably not,
because none of those are identified as a prophet.
Right.
And then the word Obadiah means servant of Jehovah.
Yeah.
So some people think that Obadiah is just calling himself servant, and he was named something else.
Yeah, maybe not even his name, maybe using it more like a title.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, but nothing as far as no dates, no real historical events that we can tie this to. Yeah. It's just a prophecy.
Right. So you look for everything in there, right? What was going on? Was there an earthquake? Was there not an earthquake?
Yeah.
But there's a series of questions in there. So what is Obadiah about? It's it's a prophecy about Edom.
Yeah.
Right. So Edom is what, a small country south of Jerusalem?
Yeah, southeast, modern day southern Jordan. And this Edom is the descendants of Esau, and Israel is the descendants of Jacob. So these literally are cousins.
Right. But throughout history, there was war between them.
Absolutely.
Bad blood, even from Esau and Jacob's time.
Right. And
stealing of a birthright.
And that's really what this is about. Verse 10: because you violently slaughtered your relatives, the people of Jacob. That's really what this whole prophecy is about is Edom not, or the family of Esau not treating Israel correctly.
Right. So we see that in verse 1. An envoy was sent among the nations, saying, "Arise, let us make war against Edom."
Yep.
So we don't know who this envoy is. More than likely, it was spiritual, a group of angels,
Probably.
going into the various nations and sowing some seeds of discontent. Yeah. So, hey, let's go
take out Edom.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. But interestingly enough, Edom had a number of alliances. And where they should have had alliances with Israel, they didn't.
Right.
They had alliances with like everyone else.
Against Israel,
right.
usually. Yeah.
Right. And we see that coming back.
Yep.
So they had gone to war with Israel, which isn't good. They had not helped Israel. And if we go back to the Abrahamic covenant, God makes a promise, and with the net translation, to the one who treats you lightly, I must curse.
Yeah.
Seems to fit here.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, it's especially, again, within the family. I think that's one of the biggest things is it's still within family. These aren't Canaanites. These aren't, Hittites. These aren't Egyptians. These aren't Assyrians or Babylonians. These are cousins. And you are intentionally, repeatedly going against Israel when you know that that they are the people of God. Right. That you aren't even pagan. Supposedly you're not even pagans. You're supposed to be worshiping the same God. You came from the same Isaac and Abraham.
Well, and especially that was the Abrahamic covenant, which was grandpa.
Yeah.
to these guys. I think it was grandpa, right? To these guys, if not a great grandpa.
Yeah.
So Edom intentionally warred against Israel. So killing brother killing brother. Other nations warred with Israel, who were Edom's alliances. Yeah. And they either actively helped the nations, even though they may not have gone war, or helped.
They would information and resources. Yeah, absolutely.
Right. And instead they gloated, which is one of the things that they got yelled at.
Yep.
And then even back in, let's see. Back forward, it had to be back, right? Moses, when he was coming down through Egypt, they wanted to take a route through Edom to get to the promised land faster.
Yep.
And they sent people ahead saying, "Hey, can we come through?" And Edom said, "Nope."
Yep. Yeah, I know.
So they took the long way around, and that's brought up a couple times where it was a problem.
Yeah. I mean, it's always been that way. One of the sort of the theme words that shows up in here is mountain, because in southern Jordan or in the area of Edom was a mountain, and it was called Mount Seir, Seir, throughout the Old Testament, and that was the Mount of Esau or Mount Edom or whatever. Well, here he's going to play off of that mountain to the holy mountain, the mountain of the Lord, Zion, Jerusalem. Right, so he's going to play off this. You think your mountain is strong; it's nothing like our mountain. My mountain. God says.
Yeah.
So I can take you. I can take your mountain. Don't think that you're safe in your mountain.
Right.
But I will establish the mountain of the Lord.
Yeah. So how bad is it going to be? Well, last week we saw basically 90% of Israel during they would be killed or taken into exile.
Right.
Here, no survivors of Edom left.
None.
No descendants of Esau left.
Yep. Not a single one. And I think that's probably already been true. Most people think that there will be none.
Right.
But definitely, even if there are today somewhere, by the time we get to the millennium, there won't be any.
Yeah.
Yep, they'll all be gone.
Right.
Yep.
So, not an uplifting book by any means, but it is from God's grace and Him letting us know His plans and Him executing as a just God.
Yeah, and keeping His covenant faithful promise to Israel that these are Israel's enemies, and they didn't have to be. But they chose to be Israel's enemies, and God had already laid out centuries earlier, this is what is going to happen if you're Israel's enemy. Which, by the way, still holds true today. If our nation or any other nation decides to be Israel's enemy, God takes that personally.
Right.
So, so even having a biblical worldview helps us see geopolitical things today.
Good.
So, and God is a God is a faithful God. So we can count on that from a good standpoint. God is a God who keeps His word.
Right.
We don't have to worry about that. So, yeah, so He'll keep His word in Amos. He'll keep His word in Obadiah. Next week we will, or for the next 2 weeks, we're going to look at Jonah and then Lamentations, and we see a faithful God again, even in those prophets. So, so come back and we'll do this again next time. We'll be in Jonah next time, continuing through some prophets. Share this with your friends and family if you think it would be helpful for them. Send us your questions, comments. We'd love to hear them, and we will see you back here next time.
Bye, everybody.